cả quý vị đã dành thời gian, dành chọn một buổi tối của mình sau một ngày dài học tập và làm việc để có thể tham gia sự kiện trực tuyến của chúng tôi. Thì tôi mong rằng là cái sự kiện ngày hôm nay có thể mang lại nhiều thông tin hữu ích dành cho quý vị. Và chủ đề của ngày hôm nay là viết bài luận cá nhân ứng tuyển Đại học Top Mỹ, và tôi là Hà Phương sẽ là host chính của sự kiện ngày hôm nay. Thì để bắt đầu sự kiện thì tôi xin đưa ra một bản khảo sát để có thể tìm hiểu xem đây có phải là sự kiện đầu tiên mà quý vị tham gia với chúng tôi hay không, hay là sự kiện thứ hai, hay là vô số sự kiện rồi. Thì trong lúc quý vị đang làm bản khảo sát thì tôi xin giới thiệu một chút về Crimson Education. Thì có thể quý vị cũng đã biết thì Crimson là một đơn vị cố vấn tuyển sinh đại học hàng đầu trên thế giới với trụ sở ở gần 30 quốc gia, và mục tiêu của chúng tôi là giúp đỡ các em học sinh trúng tuyển được vào các trường đại học mơ ước. Và có một điều mà tôi rất là vinh dự mỗi khi nhắc đến, đó chính là tỷ lệ trúng tuyển của các em học sinh Crimson cao gấp 4,5 lần so với tỷ lệ thông thường, tức là tỷ lệ trúng tuyển vào các trường đại học hàng đầu đó ạ. Vậy thì chúng tôi hỗ trợ học sinh như thế nào? Thì với học sinh Crimson thì chúng tôi hỗ trợ toàn diện trong quá trình ứng tuyển đại học, từ hồ sơ học thuật, hồ sơ hoạt động ngoại khóa cho đến các bài thi chuẩn hóa, vân vân. Và tôi cũng xin lấy một ví dụ với một học sinh mà làm việc với lại đội ngũ tại Crimson đó, thì quý vị có thể thấy thì thứ nhất là một người strategy consultant, một người có thể giúp em học sinh đưa ra cái mục tiêu cũng như đặt ra lộ trình mình nên làm gì trong những năm tiếp theo. Và người thứ hai là application consultant, một vị cố vấn về bài luận. Thì người này sẽ giúp các em mọi thứ về bài luận, từ bước gọi là brainstorm, bước review, chỉnh sửa và đánh giá. Và người thứ ba là student success manager. Nên người này có thể xem như là cầu nối giữa học sinh, phụ huynh và đội ngũ Crimson. Người tiếp theo là một test prep tutor, thì người này sẽ gọi là tutor, giúp kèm cặp cho các em về các bài thi chuẩn hóa. Và tiếp theo là một người gọi là extracurricular mentor, một cố vấn về hoạt động ngoại khóa. Và cuối cùng thì các em cũng được có nhiều giờ để làm việc với lại chuyên viên tuyển sinh, để trước khi mà các em chính thức nộp đơn thì các em có thể có cái nhìn toàn diện chắc chắn hơn về cái hồ sơ của mình. Và bên cạnh cái nguồn lực con người thì Crimson cũng rất là chú trọng vào cái gọi là công nghệ. Thì tại Crimson thì chúng tôi có một cái ứng dụng tên là Pathfinder. Thì như quý vị có thể thấy trên màn hình ở đây, thì Pathfinder có thể giúp các em học sinh và phụ huynh để nắm được là mình đã làm được những gì, mình đã đạt được bao nhiêu điểm và mình đang ở đâu so với các học sinh quốc tế khác, để từ đó mình có thể đưa ra cái mục tiêu cũng như có nguồn động lực để phát triển tốt hơn trong những cái năm sắp tới. Và đây là một cái video về Pathfinder, thì tôi có thể mở một vài giây cho quý vị để có thể hình dung rõ hơn về cái Pathfinder này.
I'm thrilled to introduce you to Crimson's newest tool for students preparing to apply to college, Pathfinder. Pathfinder is essentially a master list of everything you can choose to do during your high school or secondary school years before you apply to a US university. Pathfinder will help guide your work with your Crimson strategist as you use it to choose intermediate goals leading up to your application cycle and track your progress along the way. Pathfinder's activities were compiled by members of the Crimson team working with admissions officers at 4 top universities around the US, including 2 Ivy League schools. The key to remember with all these activities is that admissions officers have confirmed their value to the admissions process. There are definitely things not on Pathfinder that you can do during high school, but everything that's listed here has a point value that admissions officers have vouched for. With Pathfinder, we start by choosing a level to aim for that aligns with where you think you'll want to go to college. There are 5 levels. Every student starts out as a scout, The levels build as you become a greater explorer, from scout to seeker to venturer to voyager.
Đó là một chút về cái ứng dụng Pathfinder của chúng tôi. Thì như quý vị có thể thấy thì trong cái Pathfinder, cái phần mềm này được thiết kế dựa trên gọi là cá nhân hóa. Pathfinder phải dựa trên cái năng lực của các bạn để có thể đề xuất gợi ý cho một số cái trường đại học phù hợp với khả năng của các bạn. Và để được nhận cái video đầy đủ hơn thì quý vị có thể đăng ký đặt lịch với đội ngũ của chúng tôi ngay tại khung chat dưới này. Và nhờ cái nguồn lực về con người cũng như là công nghệ thì kết quả của học sinh Crimson rất là đáng kinh ngạc trong những năm tuyển sinh gần đây. Thì như quý vị có thể thấy thì có 514 đã thư mời nhập học vào Ivy League, 176 thư vào Oxbridge, hơn 1.500 thư vào top 10 trường tại Anh và hơn 3.000 thư mời nhập học vào top 50 trường tại Mỹ. Và trong các tuyển sinh gần đây thì quý vị có thể thấy một số cái con số cụ thể trên màn hình, như là có 10 bạn vào Yale, 18 bạn vào Cornell hay 26 bạn vào Columbia, vân vân. Và tại Anh thì có 21 bạn vào Oxford và 21 bạn vào Cambridge. Và để trước khi mà bắt đầu chương trình thì tôi cũng muốn tìm hiểu rõ hơn về quý vị. Sau khi mà tôi đã giới thiệu về Crimson thì tôi cũng muốn tìm hiểu sâu hơn về các quý vị đang ngồi ở đây để xem là quý vị hay con của quý vị đang học lớp mấy, đang học trường nào và trình độ tiếng Anh ra sao để tôi có thể điều chỉnh cái tốc độ chương trình tốt hơn. Và trong lúc mà quý vị làm bản khảo sát thì tôi cũng xin giới thiệu một chút về trường quốc tế CGA. Thì bên cạnh cái câu chuyện cố vấn tuyển sinh đại học thì chúng tôi cũng có gọi là trường quốc tế CGA, trường quốc tế trực tuyến CGA. Thì tại đây thì chúng tôi giảng dạy các chương trình quốc tế như IGCSE, A-Level, AP và toàn bộ cái chương trình đều được chứng nhận bởi Bộ Giáo dục Quốc tế. Đây. Và khi mà nhắc tới kết quả của học sinh CGA thì tôi cũng rất là tự hào, và tôi có thể kể một vài cái kết quả đặc biệt. Ví dụ như 92% là kết quả là kết quả mà học sinh CGA đạt được trong kỳ thi IGCSE, hay 82% là điểm trung bình của học sinh CGA trong kỳ thi A-Level. Và trong kỳ thi AP thì tôi cũng đã làm một cái bảng so sánh với học sinh CGA và học sinh thông thường. Thì tôi có thể thấy là học sinh CGA đã có kết quả vượt bậc so với học sinh thông thường. Ví dụ như 84% học sinh CGA đạt điểm 3 cộng so với tỷ lệ thông thường là 60%, hay 3,9 là số điểm trung bình của học sinh CGA so với điểm thông thường là 3.03, và 44% học sinh CGA đạt điểm 5 so với tỷ lệ thông thường là 12%. Và tôi cũng xin đi qua cái video này nhanh. Và sau khi mà được nghe về Crimson cũng như là CGA thì rất nhiều phụ huynh đã tìm đến chúng tôi để có thể được giải đáp rõ hơn về chương trình của chúng tôi, cũng như là được cố vấn năng lực dành cho các em để có thể có một cái góc nhìn tốt hơn, mục tiêu tốt hơn. Thì chúng tôi cũng mời quý vị tham gia cái buổi cố vấn năng lực này với chúng tôi để gọi là cũng được nhận những lời khuyên hữu ích từ các cố vấn học thuật của chúng tôi bằng cách scan cái mã QR trên màn hình. Và không để quý vị chờ lâu hơn nữa thì tôi cũng xin giới thiệu vị diễn giả ngày hôm nay của chúng ta, đó là cô Carolina, và cô là cố vấn chiến lược cho Đại học Anh, Đại học Mỹ và Đại học Canada. Và cô cũng từng là sinh viên của Duke University, một trong những đại học top đầu có danh tiếng tại Mỹ. Hi Carolina, welcome to our webinar.
Hi team. Can
Hi.
I go ahead? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can you share your screen? Can you share your slide?
Absolutely. All right. So good evening. Wonderful to be here with you all. I'm Carolina. I'm based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I've been working with Crimson for the last 5 years. I got involved with this line of work after studying abroad myself. And my favorite part of the US application process is the essay. So it's very, very special to be here with you all today. We'll talk a little more about what that looks like, how you can get started, and demystify some of the myths and maybe misinformation that exists out there. The goal is for you all to leave here today better informed, better prepared for your essays, and ready to get started. So how are we going to cover this? We're going to go through 4 main blocks. We're going to talk a bit about why the essays are required. We're going to talk about the Common App essay, which is the main one. I'll walk you through the different components as a recap, and then go over some examples and key takeaways. And then we'll also recap on why it's important to start early. So I saw that some of you are with us for the first time. It's great to see you. And for the ones who are coming back, great to see you again. So let's start at the beginning. Why are essays required as part of the US application system? Colleges want to hear about students and from students. The essay is the most personal component that exists in the application process. So as a recap, the application materials include academic results, so your classes and your grades that you took in high school, your extracurriculars, anything that you do when you're not in school. It can be a school club, it can be something that you do in your neighborhood, it can be something that you do virtually, it can be a summer course that you took or a camp that you're part of. Basically anything that shows your interest in anything that you find a good use of your time. Maybe it's something related to what you want to study, but not necessarily. They'll also look at your choice of major and any special programs. So the course or the courses that you're looking to study. And then they'll ask for teacher and counselor recommendations. So the idea with this is that universities can get to know you, not just in terms of numbers, not just in terms of your grades, but also who are you in the classroom? How do you work with others on group projects? How do you engage with the material? All of that will help admissions officers predict who you will be at that campus when they accept you. And then the final block, which is the focus of today, is the application essay. So as I've said, this is an application component that you get to use your voice, you get to show your perspective, and you get to tell your story. And the idea with this is, once again, for them to get to know you, but also for them to see who you are beyond these other materials, and for you to have a chance to connect these different parts of your application. So it's important also to have in mind that these essays don't stand alone. They're not a separate part of the application. They will be looked at along with all the other materials. So universities will want to see consistency between the grades, between the activities, between your essays. And that's why it's important for the essays to be connected to the other application materials. Here at Crimson, we help students brainstorm what to write about. We help them pick what essays, what topics fit better with what questions and what universities. And we help you make sure that all of your application materials are fitting together nicely and are telling a cohesive story to the admissions officers. Essays take time. I think this is one where it's difficult sometimes to predict how long it will take, especially if you've never written about yourself before. But I can assure all of you that it takes time to get to good essays. I can also tell you that if you put in the time, the essays will be good. I've worked with over 1,000 students over the years, and there have been students who, when they started, they were a little nervous about this. Were a little nervous about writing about themselves. They weren't sure what this was going to look like, but if they were patient and dedicated to the process, if they heard the feedback and they worked on the drafts and they improved their essays, then at the end, these were some of the best texts that I saw over the years. And even the students, when they read the essays at the end, they're a little surprised that they were able to write such interesting pieces of writing. So to break this down into 4 sort of stages, the first stage is to brainstorm, right? To make a list of key qualities that you want to show, to make a list of experiences or stories that you might talk about in your essays. We'll go over a few examples of this, but this is the first one. If you're getting ready to apply next year or in 2 years' time, my tip would be for you to have a notepad or even like the notepad in your phone with you, close to you, so that if you come up with an idea, write it down. Don't let it go away. Don't forget it. You might be brushing your teeth one day and you think, I could write an essay about my childhood puppy. Or, I could write an essay about the stranger that I helped at the supermarket earlier today. So make sure that you write those ideas down. You probably won't use all of them, but it's good to have them just in case. The second block is drafting. Drafting will help you turn that idea into a text. It will help you structure the flow of the essay. It will help you connect the ideas, and it will help someone who's reading that essay without knowing you understand, what are you trying to communicate? What are you trying to say about yourself? Polishing or implementing feedback. So I talked a bit about that. Don't think that your first version of every essay needs to be phenomenal. That's usually not the case. It's more helpful for you to approach this as an exercise of multiple drafts and an exercise of getting feedback and improving the essay than something that you'll want to get out perfectly at once. It's helpful in this feedback stage to have different people read your essays just to see, what impression are you transmitting with those essays? If they were to describe you based on just the essay, not what they know you, what would they say? Are you coming off as confident? Are you coming off as arrogant? Are you coming off as confused? So having these different perspectives will help you make your essay even better. I will say too much feedback can end up hurting the process. So be careful not to get so many people sharing opinions on your essay that you end up not knowing where to go, because different people have different impressions and that can get confusing. And then the fourth block, so once you're done with your main essay, you transition into supplemental essays. So the main essay, also known as a Common App essay, is the essay that gets sent to most universities that you apply to. And then each university will have additional or supplemental essays that are specific to them. I'll go into that in a little more detail. So once again, there are different types of essays. So there are essays that are more creative, that serve for you to demonstrate your quirks, your interests, your values. For the most part, they're not academic essays. So they're not essays where you're talking about a topic in an area that you're interested in or explaining a book or something that you might do at school. They're more about you, your story, and your future plans. They tend to have broader narratives, broader questions. So students all over the world, from Ho Chi Minh City to Sao Paulo to New York to Johannesburg, will have the same questions to answer. So these questions need to be broad enough that applicants from all over the world are able to come up with possible answers for them. Once again, they communicate your personality. So I can't stress this enough. It's your chance to show who you are as a person. It's your chance to talk about something that isn't part of your transcript, something that isn't part of your activities, but something that will help these admissions officers get to know you, and something that will help you stand out as well. So if you're applying for, say, a course in one of the sciences and you've done academic research, you may have participated in science Olympiads, think of how many students will also have done those things, right? So your essay is a chance to stand out among the science applicants who have done similar science activities. And then once again, for the colleges, the essays provide a sense of who you are as a prospective student. They provide them a chance to evaluate how you fit with the typical student and the community of that university. If you're a student if you're a person, who's, light, easygoing, likes to joke a lot, like that will show in your essays. The essays will have a lighter tone. And a university that appreciates that kind of humor, that kind of personality will want you there because you've shown that you're aligned with what they look for. Similarly, if it's a university that's a little more serious, they'll probably think, okay, the student wouldn't be happy here, even if they accepted us. And that's a good thing, right? Because they're not trying to bring students to that campus who won't be happy there. So the essays are a great way for them to have that filter of personality that will end up helping you later on. We want you to end up somewhere where you'll be successful, somewhere where you'll be happy. And being authentic, being genuine in your essays is one of the ways that you can do that. And then lastly, the essays allow colleges to understand your level of commitment and interest. So there are these more open personal essays about like a value that you have or an experience that shaped your personality. But then there are also more college specific essays. So it could be that a university, Cornell, for example, asks engineers, why do you want to study engineering at Cornell? What is it about our offerings that makes you think that Cornell is the best place for you to pursue your academic goals? So in this kind of essay, you would touch on, for example, specific professors or research labs or opportunities that only Cornell offers to show them that you've done your research and to show them that you'd be happy and successful and you'd take advantage of the opportunities that they offer over there. So diving a little deeper into the Common App essay. So the Common App essay is part of the Common Application. This is a platform that is used by close to 1,000 universities. And it's a platform that asks you to provide a lot of information about yourself. So in terms of extracurricular and leadership components, you'll report up to 10 extracurricular activities that you've done. You'll share your years of participation in those. You'll share your commitment, so how many hours per week and how many weeks per year you dedicated to that activity. You'll share any awards that you've won as well, both academic and non-academic. And this will show universities how you spent your time outside of the classroom. The Common Application also has a testing section. So it's a section where you'll report any SATs, ACTs, TOEFL or IELTS, any IBs, any APs, any A-levels, any standardized tests that you've taken. You'll report it so that the universities can see. As mentioned, you'll also have recommendation letters. So you'll send in teacher recommendations from teachers who have taught you in your last 2 years of high school, ideally. You'll have a counselor recommendation or a coordinator or a homeroom teacher or a principal, depending on the school, depending on the place in the world. It'll be one of those. And this letter will talk about who you are in the context of the community of the school. So not just academically, but how you were involved with activities. They can also talk about any personal or family circumstances. And then the essay. So as mentioned, you'll have the main essay, which is about 600 words long, and then supplemental essays for each university. So it could be that a few universities don't have additional essays. That happens, but it could also be that they have multiple. So Stanford University, which is one of the most commonly applied to universities, has 8 supplemental essays that they ask students to do. And every year we work with students who apply to Stanford and we help them think about, okay, what to talk about in each of those 8 essays that will help them be competitive, that will help them show their narrative, and that will also catch the eye of the admissions officer and make an impression. And then finally, many universities will invite students for an interview. So some of them you'll interview before applying, but most of them you interview after applying. And this is usually an interview with an alumni, so someone who has studied at that university. And it's your chance to show your interest. It's your chance to show that you've done your research and that you know that university, but also to learn about that university, because you're speaking with someone who studied there. You're speaking with someone who's lived on that campus, and it's a great opportunity to get their impressions of what it was like to go to, say, Amherst College as a student from Vietnam, or Yale as a student from Brazil. And then just to make it a little more tangible, we have the relative weight of each of these components. So academics are about 40% of the process. It's the most important component. Extracurriculars around 30, essays and interview around 30 as well. And in terms of timelines, academics and extracurriculars, applications as a whole, you send in your first round at the start of November, and you hear back in December. So we're already starting to hear back from some of the students who applied this cycle. Regular decision. So most other applications you send in at the start of January, so in the next few weeks. And then from January to April of the next year, you get invited to interviews and you hear back from all universities. We'll have time for Q&A in a bit, but as the questions come up, please use our Q&A feature here on Zoom, and we'll get to them soon. Okay, so to recap, the Common Application Essay brings your application to life. Admissions officers want to know what kind of person you'll be. They want to get a sense of, if they bring you to that community, how will you add? How will you shape it? And despite it being an application process that has many components, it's impossible to capture all of you. It's impossible to capture your entire person in a single essay or even in an entire application. So you need to prioritize what you want to show. You need to prioritize what elements are the most important to help you stand out from that applicant pool. And one myth that a lot of students believe coming into the process is that they need to have a out of this world story to share. So if you're thinking that, if you're wondering like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Most students did not cure cancer by age 17. Most students did not go to the moon. Most students end up talking about things that are part of their day-to-day life, their day-to-day routine, but they're able to show how that was meaningful to them. They're able to show how that experience or how that story transformed one of their values or one of their perspectives. And that's the key. It's finding something that you can give meaning to and showing that growth, showing that transformation. I'll go through an example in a bit to make it a little clearer. So these are the possible Common App essay prompts. You pick one out of the 7 and you write about 600 words, as I've mentioned. And you can see that, like I said, these are very open questions. These are very broad, and they're a mix of very, very open questions. A couple of them talk about challenges that you've overcome specifically. One of them talks about achievements or an accomplishment. So something that you did to show that growth or that understanding of yourself. And then a couple are a little more specific. So we have number 6 is more intellectual. So I said that this essay tends to not be intellectual, and I stand by that. Even though this is an essay that asks you to talk about something that you engage with, it's still meant to be personal. So it's still meant to be something that you can show your personality through. You can show your values and not just something that you learn academically. And then the other very specific one, which is new, is this number 4, which is about gratitude. So they're asking you to talk about something that someone has done that has surprised you in a positive way. There isn't a better or worse question out of these 7. They don't have a preference for any of them. You really do have 7 options to pick from. And in thinking about what to write, I'd recommend jotting down ideas for all of them. So have as many options as you can. Discuss them with your Crimson team or with your teachers or with your friends, whoever you have near you, and help, like use their help to understand what is the best use of the space for you. We'll talk a little more about what support looks like at Crimson a little later as well, if you're curious. So how do I choose a topic? Like I said, start with as many as you can. And if you don't choose them for this main essay, you might still choose them for the supplemental essay. So you want to list as many ideas as you can. And once again, it doesn't need to be something huge. It can be something specific. Actually, many essays tend to be better the more specific the topic. And there's no rule that it needs to be serious. There's no rule that it needs to be academic. This is one thing that a lot of international students wonder, like, can I really talk about something that is local to my culture or something that is part of my family that admissions officers might not know about? Absolutely. Like, the more specific, the more personal you can make it, the more memorable it's likely to become to an admissions officer who's reading 50, 60 applications in a day. And the sort of next question to reflect on is, how is that idea or how does that topic have potential to show who you are and how you've changed or how you've grown? What have you learned? Because that's part of it, right? It's showing them that you can stop, reflect, and grow from an experience, and not just go through your routine or go through life sort of in autopilot mode. So here is a tip from the Yale admissions officers. When you write your essays and short answer responses, write about something that matters to you. Use your own voice. Pick topics that will give us an idea of who you are. Your perspective, the lens through which you view your topic, is far more important than the specific topic yourself. So once again, there is no limit to what you can or cannot write about. Obviously, you want to have your audience in mind. You're writing for an admissions officer. You're writing for a university that you want to study. So you want to talk about, interesting and positive things. But even things that at the time weren't so positive, if you can talk about how you've learned from them, how you've grown, it might still work. To give a couple of sort of more creative examples that I've seen over the years, I had one student a few years ago who wrote about being stuck in traffic in São Paulo every day. So similar to other big cities in the world, São Paulo traffic is crazy, and some students spend close to 3 hours a day in a car going to and from school. And he realized that he didn't get motion sickness if he read while in the car. So he used his drives to school to read about economics. And at the end of the year, he had read something like 15 or 20 books about different economics topics. And that was the essay. I got stuck in traffic and I read, and it was obviously deeper than that, but he talked about using something that could have been frustrating or could have been empty time to be productive. Another very creative one that I've seen. I had a student once who wrote her essay in letter form. So it was a letter to her younger self, talking about the divorce process that her parents had gone through and how it had affected her. And it was an essay where she touched on the ways that she had struggled over that time, but also in the ways that she had grown. So it was an essay that showed the challenge, but also how the student had overcome that challenge. And then one last example. Last year, I worked with a student who was applying for marine biology, and she was also a national level swimmer. So she was a pretty big deal. She had won lots of national competitions in swimming, and she talked about a open sea race she did once, a race where she had to swim from point A to point B in the ocean, where instead of just focusing on winning, instead of just focusing on the race, she realized that her friend was struggling with the waves, went back, calmed him down, and they finished the race together. Was this the most important part of the essay? No. So after the race, her father saw the whole thing that had happened, and he told her off. he said, winning is the most important thing. You've been training for months, and then you gave all of that up to help your friend. So then she in turn told him, he's important to me. I wouldn't have been able to enjoy the win if I knew that was happening. And so it ended up being an essay that used swimming to talk about her relationship with her father, and used swimming to talk about a time when she defended something that she believed in. So these are just a few examples to illustrate. None of these were, very big, flew to the moon ideas, but just to show you that it can be something that was important for you and that you can turn it into an essay for the admissions process. So we'll pause here for a bit. I know this was a lot of content, and we have our next poll, so I'll leave it a minute.
Dạ vâng, thì như quý vị cũng có thể thấy và cũng vừa nghe cô Carol đã trình bày thì có rất nhiều yếu tố trong cái việc viết luận. Bạn phải làm sao viết mà để cho ban tuyển sinh thấy được cái con người của mình như thế nào, nhưng mà cũng không được quá là khuôn mẫu. Đó thì và có rất nhiều yêu cầu khác nữa, thì để mà có thể gọi định hướng tốt hơn cho việc viết luận và nắm rõ hơn về yêu cầu của các dạng bài thì chúng tôi xin mời quý vị tham gia một cái buổi cố vấn với cố vấn học thuật của chúng tôi để có thể có cái nhìn toàn diện hơn về việc viết luận cũng như là ứng tuyển đại học, và đội ngũ của chúng tôi sẽ đưa ra một cái bảng khảo sát như thế này và quý vị có thể đánh yes, thì nhờ đó thì quý vị có thể tham gia cái buổi cố vấn này với chúng tôi. Dạ vâng, thì trong lúc mà cô Carol vừa mới bị out ra ngoài thì tôi thấy có rất nhiều người ở đây đang muốn là xin record buổi workshop này, thì tôi xin được phép nói luôn là do là tính bảo mật của Crimson cho nên chúng tôi không thể gửi record cho tất cả mọi người, và chúng tôi rất là khuyến khích tất cả quý vị ở đây nên ở lại đến cuối chương trình để có thể tương tác trực tiếp với lại diễn giả Carol để có thể gọi là mang về cho mình những thông tin hữu ích cũng như là tham gia một cách hiệu quả hơn ạ. Dạ, tôi xin cảm ơn. Dạ vâng, hiện tại cô Carol đã vào với chúng ta rồi, và tôi sẽ tiếp tục phần nhường lại phần cho cô Carol. So Carol, please go ahead. I will hand over to you.
Wonderful. All right, so let's keep going. We have more good stuff to get through. Okay, so now let's read a full sample essay by a student who was admitted to a university from the Ivy League, and we'll also talk about why this essay works. So my data, I'll read the essay and then I'll pause and reflect on the different parts, just to make it easier to go through. It might be that this is the first essay that some of you are seeing. My dad and I made the ascent together. We climbed the precipice trail, the Acadia National Park path of lore, whose steep cliffs and trail side signs, warning of death, convince more prudent hikers to turn around before the halfway mark. Resting, I gazed out beyond the dizzying drop below the green Maine foothills and blue Atlantic Ocean. I appreciated the slight strain in my step, ready to move onward. My dad also stood, his hat crooked and backwards, his shirt soaked through, still panting for breath. I think we need a water break, I said, looking him over. I think so too, he replied. So this is the opening of the essay. It reads more like a short story, right? There's elements of storytelling in it. It's very vivid, it's very visual. And this is the essay setup. It's detailed, you can imagine the scene. And these are elements that make the best essays as well. You want to transport the reader back to the scene that you're sharing. And a lot of this is done through including details that help them imagine the scene, that help them experience it again with you through the text. My relationship with my dad is a complicated one. In the halcyon days of my childhood, I remember our Saturday morning dump runs, followed by a stop at McDonald's, where as soon as he let me, I would order the exact same big and tasty meal he would. Then he took me hiking, camping, and skiing. His patient guidance and care on the trail stood in stark contrast to my frustrated, bumbling childhood clumsiness. I would whine and cry and yell on hikes too long or hills too steep. He would stop, listen, and encourage me onward. With him, I was comfortable and secure. He could do no wrong. So this continues to set up the scene, but it also gives us more detail about the different characters in the essay. It's the paragraph that introduces the conflict that will come. So in this, we get to see some tension, right? We get to see these two people who are very different. The father that is caring, that is encouraging, the student that is, a little whiny at times, maybe not so excited to be on these hikes, but still the two are working together. The two are spending time together. And at the same time, we know that this might not be all of it, because the essay introduces to this idea that the relationship will get complicated. In time, as we both grew older, this changed. He lost his job and fell into a depression and an absent-mindedness I found hard to understand. Despite his dealing with his mental illness, I became more critical, more attentive to his flaws and shortcomings. He lost his glasses, got linguine when we asked for rigatoni at the grocery store, and forgot my friends' names. At family dinner, he sat largely silent until he interrupted with a non sequitur or unrelated question. I promised myself, with all my naive bravado, that I would never make myself vulnerable like he did, that I would never wallow in past regrets or failures. I would be assertive, I told myself. I would be a man. So this is the conflict, right? We see that introduction has escalated into something more intense. And the conflict is that as the writer grows up, he loses respect for his father and he no longer understands him. If we take the perspective of the father, we also see that he's going through some really tough times, but this essay is about the student. So this author does a really good job of sharing about the father, presenting what is happening, but bringing back the focus to his own internal states, to how he is dealing with that situation. So when I scaled that trail with so much comparative ease, I initially relished in the fact that I walked ahead. I carried the pack. I checked in on him. I thought I was being a man. Sitting down, my dad's breathing slowed, and he asked me, like he had so many times, if I had read David Brooks' column that week. I hadn't. So he filled me in. Listening to him discuss the necessity of imperfection in the democratic process, I felt a twinge of guilt. Guilt that I had fancied myself superior. Guilt that I had ever brought into facile standards of manhood. That I had imagined being a proper man meant unfailing vigor on a hiking trail. Never dealing with switchbacks or setbacks. Never losing your footing or your way. So this paragraph is where the author, or these two paragraphs, is where the author shows their growth. Initially, they have this, I can do it attitude. I'm invincible. And then this is the part of the essay that breaks that. This is the part of the essay where they show the admissions officer that they were able to pause, look internally, and with the help of the situation, reevaluate how they wanted to be, what they valued, and how they wanted that relationship to look. So it's also, again, with this contrast with the father, when the father reaches out, the father is able to connect with him in a way that hadn't happened before. And if we're thinking about like the intensity of the paragraph, so it starts with something more narrative, something more almost like a movie scene opening. Then we have the description of the childhood. Then we have the conflict and something that is very intense, very strong, but also kind of negative. And then here, the intensity goes down a bit. So it's a little slower, but it's also deeper and it's also less negative. And this is where we have the switch. I looked at my dad and knew all of those notions about employment, competent hiking, or getting the right type of pasta at the grocery store were false. I looked at my dad and saw that being a man isn't about any sort of superficial external measure, as it was during my childhood misadventures. It's about us, the imperfect son with the imperfect father, supporting each other up the proverbial mountain. So here we start to see the resolution, or the different parts of the essays being tied together. And this particular paragraph is pretty strong for a couple of reasons. So this structure that they start the sentence, the two first sentences with, I looked at my dad, ta 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 ta. I looked at my dad, ta 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 ta. This repetition makes the reader remember that this whole transformation happened with the student looking at the dad, learning from the dad, learning with the dad. They're also very, very detailed oriented, and they touch on things that they mentioned earlier in the essay. So they talk about the type of pasta. Remember the rigatoni that they mentioned at the grocery store? They talk about hiking. They talk about employment. So, excuse me, the student is really good at introducing things and then tying them together in a way that makes the essay focused and in a way that doesn't leave any loose ends for the reader to wonder what happened with this thing, or why did they mention that? So it's important to always tie together the things at the end of the text. For me, the transition to manhood was not an external one. Fortunately, there was no rite of passage or singular circumstance that forced me to become a man. Rather, sitting there against a cliff with my father, I wondered if maybe adulthood simply meant looking beyond oneself to the other without any pretense or pomp. Maybe my father, with his unpretentious generosity and willingness to get back up and continue the trek, is the best example of man I have. He finished up his thoughts about the Brooks article, his breathing still audible. How about we get that water, I said, reaching into the pack. So these paragraphs end up the resolution of the essay. It makes clear to the reader what the lesson learned. It makes what the lesson learned was. It wraps up the things that they were thinking about, they were discussing. And even though it doesn't follow that typical format of in conclusion, it does conclude the specific journey or the specific trek that the essay took us on. Conclusions are hard. Conclusions are maybe the hardest part of the Common App essay, of most essays. So once again, don't underestimate the amount of time that you might need to polish this, and don't underestimate the importance of feedback to make sure that the conclusions are tying the essays nicely as well. Excuse me. Okay, if you're curious for more examples, please check out our website or social media. There are other essays that you can learn about there, and you'll see the range of stories and the range of experiences that students have written about. My other warning that I'll offer here is examples are helpful. Examples can help you, get inspiration, but don't get too hung up on what people have done before, because no one has lived the lives that you have. No one has your stories. No one has your experiences. So don't think that, you need to keep comparing yourself to other essays. If you realize that that's not helping you, if you think that's just stressing you out even more, then don't use that as a resource. That's okay too. All right, so I talked a bit paragraph for paragraph why this essay works, but we have some broader points to touch on as well, which are applicable to other essays and that will help you make sure that your essays are strong too. So this essay is anchored in a simple anecdote. It's an essay about a hike. It's specific, it's tangible, and it's something where if I asked any of the 50 people here, what was the story in the essay that we read, everyone should say a hike or something along those lines. The foundation of the story is the relationship between the author and his father. So even though the essay is anchored in the tangible hike on the mountain, it's really an essay about that relationship and how that relationship helped the author develop a conflict that was in them, which brings them to number 3. So the conflict is primarily internal. Yes, there's a relationship with another person, but we get from the descriptions how the questions and the changes and the evolution happened within the author. So at no point does the father challenge him. At no point does he say, come on, grow up, come on, be a man. No, it's all about what the author is seeing and what the author thinks being a man should or shouldn't be. The essay is well written, personal, authentic, values driven, and insightful. So it's an essay where a different student who might have gone on hikes with their father might not have been able to write this, because it's a student who reflected on how this had created conditions for them to evaluate what it meant to grow up and what kind of person or what kind of man specifically they wanted to grow up into. And it's an essay that, even though it includes elements of storytelling, its priority is the author's growth. So this is another way that is helpful to think about the Common App essays. There needs to be the narrative, but there also needs to be the reflection. There also needs to be that growth, the what and the so what. So if it's too narrative, but doesn't have that growth, it's a story. And the essay is not a story. The essay is supposed to be an essay. If there's too much reflection, but no story, that's less interesting for the reader. So if it's an essay where a student had spent 500 or 600 words just reflecting on what it meant to grow up, what it meant to be a man, that wouldn't have been as interesting for us to read. That wouldn't have been as memorable. So remember to balance those two: narrative, reflection. Now you might be thinking, okay, what am I going to write about? And we come back to this first step of brainstorming. So in brainstorming, there are a few approaches you can take. The first one is to think about what values might you want to show. Here are a few examples. If you have ideas for yourself, jot them down. If you're unsure of where to go with this, you can ask friends and family. Like, if you had to describe me with 2 or 3 words, what would those be? Or if you had to pinpoint what values drive my decisions, what would those be? It's really interesting to hear what impression you leave on the people around you. You can also brainstorm thinking about key experiences. So critical junctures or transitions or conflicts that you've gone through your life. It can be things like when you change schools, or when your younger sibling was born, or when you joined a new sports team, or when you didn't get selected for a play, but your best friend did. And what did that mean for your relationship? Think about key memories. So I'm not sure how many people here will know this, but there's a really cool Pixar movie called Inside Out. And they have this concept of core memories, where they're experiences that are so important to you that they influence your personality and they influence the rest of your life. So if you can think back to, say, I became a caring person the day that my family brought our puppy home. That's the value, care. The experience or the memory is when the puppy came home. So you can choose to talk about the puppy to show how you've cared and how you've developed to care for another living being, for example. Or day-to-day thing. It could be that you have something that you do every day, and that's what you want to use as the anecdote to talk about something else. One essay that I've seen a couple of times, so I don't recommend using it, but I'll use it just to illustrate, is I've seen a couple of students write about Vietnamese coffee to talk about conflicting parts of their personalities. So they talk about the condensed milk being very sweet, and then the coffee being very bitter. And then they might also describe, say, a family recipe that they do differently from their friends or from other people. So things like that, things in your day-to-day routine, maybe how you make your breakfast or your walk to school, like things that can seem almost boring or ordinary, inject meaning into those, because no one, like I said, those experiences are unique. And it could be that in those things you're able to stand out. In those things you're able to extract a story or a transformation that will make an impact on admissions officers. Which brings us to block number 3. So how do you reflect about all of this? Make sense of your experiences. How are your experiences and your values connected? So think about, you can do this both ways. You can think about, what are your values, and maybe what are some experiences that helped you develop those, or what were some experiences that made you use one of your values to act, or the other way around. You can think about experiences and think about what values did those lead you to develop. What parts of your personality are the way they are because of important things that happen to you. And then it's also interesting to project into the future. So not just talk about the past, but make sure that the reader is understanding, how do your values influence who you want to be? So in the essay that we read, the student talked about the childhood, what they thought being a man was, that transformation of what it is now, and then the future-oriented part of what does that mean moving forward? So how are they going to be a different person based on this new understanding of what it means to be a good man? It's a lot, I know. Remember I said it takes months to get this essay together. I don't expect anyone to have this ready by the hour and a half that we'll spend together, but this is a bit of the process that hopefully you will go through to get to the best essays that you can. And this is a process that you can go through with help as well. So you don't need to do this alone. So once you have ideas, making it a little more tangible. So step 1, outline your essay. Once you have a possible specific anecdote, think about what part of that anecdote you want to share. You only have 650 words, so you probably won't be able to tell the whole thing. You'll have to zoom in on a specific scene or a specific moment of that anecdote. And again, the tip is pick something, that will help you be introspective. So pick something that will allow you to look inwards and show them what your internal processes are around that anecdote or that situation. To organize your ideas, touched on this as well, make a list. So 20 or 30 things, and this really can be things. It can be experiences, it can be values, it can be random thoughts, it can be beliefs, it can be your favorite movie, it can be a character from a TV show who you think is really funny or really scary, or I don't know, a weird interest that you have, your spirit animal, anything. There isn't a rule to what these can or cannot be. And then have this reflection of what are the ones that are going to help you stand out. So what are the ones that instead would better fit into supplemental essays? It could be that some of these ideas are very important to you and very interesting, but they're not really 650 words, deepest thing you can tell about yourself idea. So it might be that they're going to make, a really cool supplemental essay for 250 words. So you've picked the anecdotes, you've picked the idea, you've outlined something that includes an opportunity to show that internal conflict and growth. As you're honing in on what that growth will look like, don't be afraid to be humble. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and show them how you've learned. Remember, this author used very, very honest language and very honest tone. He was pretty open about how he judged his father. He was pretty open about how he felt superior, and being able to talk about that so openly and then also show how you've grown is part of what makes this essay so strong, right? So admissions officers are looking to see, okay, who is a student who can talk about their mistakes very openly and also show us how they've learned from these. Make sure that the tension is related to a wider lesson or relevance. So again, the experience doesn't need to be big, but ideally the lesson from it will be broader than just that specific situation. It'll be something that will help us see how you overcame that tension in a way that will help you in your future. So anecdote, tension situation, internal process, internal growth, future, how will that help you? How will that shape you moving forward? And then step 4, related to that, make sure that you can show that you're committed to ongoing self-improvement after that lesson. So it doesn't need to be something broad and cliche, like from that moment on, I always did this, but just make sure that you're showing them that it's not just something for that situation, something that you're going to take with you, whether for college, grown-up life, future relationships, something that is a little more applied, but also broader than just that specific experience. Okay. We'll do a quick exercise to wrap up. This is the question that essay answered. I'm going to leave it here for about 30 seconds and ask all of you to jot down at least one idea that you might talk about if you had to answer this essay. Just write it down to yourself. No need to share. Just want to make sure that everyone leaves here with at least one idea that they could use.
Okay, Carol, so maybe we can skip this exercise and we'll come back later if we have time.
So to recap, do's and don'ts of the Common App essay. Don't use this essay to rehash your resume, your CV, or Common App activity section. They'll already have that information from other parts of the application. Don't use it to prove that you're a genius or that you discovered the meaning of life. Keep it focused, keep it modest, keep it personal. You can and should use this essay to discuss a life-changing experience, family, identity, race, class, or gender, for example. And you can and should use this essay to talk about parts of yourself that only those closest to you, teachers, friends, family, know and understand.
Thank you, Carol. I will hand over here. I will share my screen. Dạ vâng, thì đó là toàn bộ phần trình bày mà cô Carol đã trình bày cho tất cả các quý vị đang ngồi ở đây. Có thể quý vị thấy rất là dài bởi vì bài luận thì có rất nhiều thứ để nói, từ đề bài rồi tới yêu cầu rồi tới trải nghiệm vân vân. Thì đó là một cái quá trình dài như cô Carol đã nói, thì essay take time, tức là essay và một bài luận thì cần rất nhiều thời gian để mình trau dồi từ kỹ năng cho tới trải nghiệm, thì mình có thể phải trau dồi theo tháng, theo năm. Đó là lý do mà khi mà bắt đầu thì các bạn cần phải có một cái định hướng rõ ràng, các bạn cần phải làm gì đó để có thể đỡ tốn nhiều thời gian hơn. Thì để mà có gọi là một cái định hướng tốt cho mình thì tôi rất khuyến khích các quý vị ngồi ở đây có thể đặt lịch tư vấn với chúng tôi để có thể gọi là có một cái nhìn toàn diện về cái bài luận của mình, về những cái mà yêu cầu hoặc là mục tiêu mà mình cần phải đạt được trong những năm tới. Thì đội ngũ Crimson sẽ đưa ra một cái bảng khảo sát để quý vị có thể đặt lịch với chúng tôi để được cố vấn không chỉ là về bài luận nhưng mà về cả cái quá trình ứng tuyển đại học. Thì quý vị có thể tick yes nếu như mà thực sự muốn gặp những người như cô Carol đang ngồi ở đây. Dạ vâng, thì bên cạnh câu chuyện là viết luận thì trong quá trình ứng tuyển thì chúng ta cũng cần phải nâng cao cái khả năng học thuật của mình. Thì bởi vì khi mà ứng tuyển thì mình sẽ có rất nhiều thứ mà mình cần phải làm. Bài luận chỉ là một trong những cái mà mình cần phải làm, và học thuật hay hoạt động ngoại khóa nữa. Đó thì tôi cũng xin giới thiệu về trường CGA. Thì tại trường CGA thì quý vị hoàn toàn có thể đến với chúng tôi để có thể trở thành học sinh CGA. Và tại CGA thì chúng tôi có 2 hình thức học. một là part time và hai là full time. Thì với part time thì các bạn có thể xem CGA như là một cái trường học bên ngoài. Khi mà các bạn học chính khóa xong thì các bạn có thể học thêm các môn học bên ngoài với CGA, hoặc là các bạn có thể chọn CGA là full time, gọi là một cái trường học chính khóa. Và như tôi đã nói thì CGA giảng dạy các chương trình quốc tế như IGCSE, A-Level, AP và US Diploma, đều là những chương trình mà được công nhận bởi Bộ Giáo dục Quốc tế. Và điều này thì sẽ giúp ích rất nhiều cho việc khi mà các bạn ứng tuyển đại học. Và tại CGA thì các bạn có thể thấy là có đa dạng môn học từ A-Level, US Diploma, Pre-IG, IGCSE hay Advanced Placement ở đây. Và tại CGA thì các học sinh CGA còn được có rất nhiều cơ hội được tiếp cận với các tập đoàn đa quốc gia. Điều này nghĩa là các bạn đều có rất nhiều cơ hội để thực tập tại các công ty lớn như là Uber, Denton, KPMG, PwC. Và tại CGA thì cũng có rất nhiều cái câu lạc bộ hoạt động ngoại khóa như là Game Development, Internship hay Debate Team, và giúp ích rất nhiều cho các bạn trong việc là nâng cấp hồ sơ hoạt động ngoại khóa của mình. Thì các bạn cũng có thể cân nhắc CGA để tham gia. Và chúng ta sẽ đến với phần Q&A. So Carol, we'll go to the Q&A. Maybe we'll, yeah, are you there? Yeah. So maybe we will answer like 1 or 2 questions because we have no time here. So I will read out loud the question for you. Okay, I see one question. I will read in Vietnamese first and then translate into English. Okay, có một bạn hỏi là bạn chọn nước Mỹ để du học do kinh tế gia đình có hạn nên lựa chọn phương thức học bổng, nhưng có lẽ điều này hơi khó. Hiện tại tiếng Anh hơi kém. So bạn đó muốn gợi ý thêm những trường có đào tạo ngành này. So Carol, so these students, I guess, choose to apply the medicine in the US. So because like the condition of her family is quite hard, quite difficult. So she wants to apply through the scholarship, but she feels difficult for her, and her English is not really good. So can you suggest some ways for her to maybe develop?
Yeah, so if you know that the English isn't where it needs to be, I would focus on that. That is the most important thing you can focus on. And make sure that you have contact with English as much as you can and in different ways. So read books, fiction, nonfiction, literature, listen to things in English. They can be movies, they can be podcasts, and also make sure that you're practicing your English so that you're writing and speaking English, because it's a skill, right? So the more you practice it, the better you will get. And it's a skill that you will need for every part of your application and for your college experience later on.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask the second question. So I will read in Vietnamese first. Thì có một bạn đã hỏi là I haven't taken the SAT test, tức là bạn này chưa có làm bài SAT, bài kiểm tra SAT. So vậy thì bạn đó có cơ hội để được trúng tuyển vào các trường đại học tại Mỹ không? Yeah, so this one asks like he or she hasn't taken the SAT test. So does he or she stand any chances of applying to any top universities in the US?
So many universities are test optional, so you can still apply without an SAT score, but know that many students will have a test. So we recommend students take them if they can, but if you didn't for whichever circumstances, that doesn't mean that you can't apply. So in short, yes, you can still apply to most top universities even without an SAT score.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carol. So I will go ahead. So maybe we can come back if we still have time. Yeah. Và tôi sẽ tiếp tục đi đến phần tiếp theo. bởi vì thời gian không còn nữa nên tôi sẽ bắt lại phần Q&A nếu như mà chúng ta còn thời gian. Và tiếp theo thì tôi sẽ nói về việc là tại sao các bạn học sinh nên bắt đầu từ sớm. Thì theo những cái số liệu thống kê của các học sinh tại Crimson thì chúng tôi nhận thấy là cái việc chuẩn bị từ sớm có thể tăng khả năng trúng tuyển cho các bạn học sinh từ 3 đến 4 lần. Và 81% học sinh tại Crimson đã có hơn 2 năm được hỗ trợ. Thì điều này có nghĩa là các bạn học sinh tại Crimson hiện tại thì đã có gọi là lợi thế cạnh tranh cao hơn rất nhiều so với các học sinh thông thường. Và khi mà các bạn bắt đầu sớm thì các bạn sẽ được truy cập vào những nguồn tài liệu mà các bạn chỉ có thể thấy được tại Crimson thôi. Và điều cuối cùng rất quan trọng đó là mình là một học sinh Việt Nam, thì khi mà mình cạnh tranh với các học sinh quốc tế thì nó sẽ phải mất rất là nhiều thời gian. Ví dụ như cái việc mà làm bài luận là một trong những cái mà các bạn cần phải đầu tư rất nhiều thời gian, rất nhiều năm để các bạn có được cái trải nghiệm mà gọi là standing the high level, international level, về mang tầm cỡ quốc tế. Đó thì các bạn cần, chúng tôi rất khuyến khích các bạn nên bắt đầu từ sớm từ bây giờ. Và để bắt đầu từ sớm thì tôi cũng gợi ý một cái lộ trình dành cho các bạn, thì các bạn có thể tham khảo ở đây. Thì bắt đầu từ lớp 8 thì các bạn có thể làm những điều đơn giản, có thể thử một số các hoạt động, một số cái sở thích để tìm ra được cái niềm đam mê, sở thích của mình. Và lên đến lớp 9 thì bạn có thể xây dựng cái nền tảng dựa trên những cái mà bạn đã làm trong năm lớp 8. Và lúc này thì bạn vẫn phải nên duy trì cái điểm số, cái học thuật của mình sao cho tốt. Và lên năm lớp 10 thì bạn sẽ phải bắt đầu ôn luyện các bài thi chuẩn hóa. Rồi lúc này thì bạn có thể tự tạo ra một số cái hoạt động với vai trò là một leadership đó. Và lên đến lớp 11 thì bạn bắt đầu là phải làm bài thi chuẩn hóa nè, rồi hoạt động ngoại khóa thì bạn sẽ phải cân nhắc chọn 1 đến 2 hoạt động mà có tầm ảnh hưởng lớn. Và đây cũng là thời điểm mà bạn nên quyết định xem là bạn nên ứng tuyển sớm hay ứng tuyển thường. Và đến năm lớp 12 thì đây là lúc mà bạn nên chuẩn bị cho phòng phỏng vấn nè, rồi lên danh sách chọn trường và để ý tới các deadline, các có một thời gian quan trọng. Đó, và dựa theo cái lộ trình như vậy thì các học sinh Crimson tại Việt Nam đã đổ vào những cái trường top. Quý vị có thể thấy một số trường top tại Mỹ như UC Berkeley, Washington, UCLA, Grinnell, hay một số trường tại Anh như Warwick, UCL, LSE, Imperial College London, vân vân. Và không chỉ những trường top mà còn vào những ngành học khó như ngành Medicine Law ở Anh hay Medicine ở Australia, vân vân. Và đây là một số gương mặt tiêu biểu tại Crimson. Và tôi cũng xin rút lại là tại Crimson thì chúng tôi có 2 mảng, một là cố vấn tuyển sinh đại học và thứ hai là trường quốc tế CGA, giảng dạy các chương trình quốc tế như IGCSE, A-Level, AP. Đó. Và thì tại CGA thì tại Crimson hay CGA thì các bạn học sinh đều được cố vấn về các hoạt động ngoại khóa như tôi đã nêu trên, từ cái việc chọn các hoạt động ngoại khóa để tham gia, rồi bạn nên thành lập cái hoạt động ngoại khóa như thế nào, thành lập câu lạc bộ cho riêng mình như thế nào, vân vân. Và các bạn hoàn toàn có cơ hội được theo học cái Crimson Code, tức là một cái gọi là chương trình của Crimson giúp các bạn được luyện về web development, app development, vân vân, dành cho các bạn yêu thích phần mềm. Và các bạn khi mà theo Crimson thì các bạn cũng có thể được gọi là theo các cơ hội thực tập vào các tập đoàn quốc tế như là Denton, HSBC, vân vân. Và tôi cũng xin nói về cái lợi thế của Crimson ở đây. Thì chúng tôi có 4 lợi thế rất lớn. Thứ nhất là khả năng đỗ vào Ivy League cao gấp 4 lần. Thứ hai là môi trường đẳng cấp quốc tế. Thứ ba là chúng tôi có nguồn tài nguyên độc quyền. Và cuối cùng là chúng tôi luôn luôn định hướng kết quả đầu ra cho học sinh một cách rất là thực tế. Vậy thì bạn có thể bắt đầu với Crimson như thế nào? Thì bước thứ nhất là chúng tôi và các gia đình sẽ cùng nhau ngồi lại với nhau từ 30 đến 45 phút để có thể trao đổi, hiểu rõ hơn về nhau. Và bước thứ hai sau đó là chúng ta sẽ cùng bàn bạc để đưa ra một cái plan cụ thể, và cuối cùng là chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu tiến hành cái plan. Và vậy thì có gì trong cái buổi cố vấn như vậy? Thì thứ nhất thì cố vấn sẽ phải tìm hiểu xem là hiện tại là bạn đang lớp mấy nè, trường nào, bạn đang có khả năng như thế nào, bạn học chương trình gì ở trường, bạn đã và đang làm được gì rồi. Và thứ hai thì chúng tôi sẽ muốn tìm ra điểm mạnh hay điểm yếu của bạn. Và thứ ba thì tôi sẽ phải xem là Crimson có thể hỗ trợ được gì cho bạn hay không, thì từ đó mới đưa ra những cái lời khuyên để các bạn có thể đặt cái mục tiêu làm sao để đạt được kết quả đầu ra thực tế. Và đó là những gì mà tôi đã giới thiệu về Crimson và CGA. Thì nếu như mà quý vị thật sự mong muốn được cố vấn về tất cả mọi mảng trong quá trình ứng tuyển đại học, ví dụ như học thuật, hoạt động ngoại khóa hay bài luận, thì quý vị hoàn toàn có thể đặt lịch tư vấn với chúng tôi bằng cách tích là yes. Dạ, thì hiện tại thời gian cũng không còn nữa, thì tôi cũng xin kết thúc chương trình ở đây. Thì tôi rất cảm ơn quý vị đã dành trọn một buổi tối tham gia với Crimson Education ngày hôm nay. Thì tôi mong rằng là cái sự kiện trực tuyến ngày hôm nay đã mang đến cho quý vị nhiều góc nhìn thú vị về cái bài luận của mình, cũng như là quá trình ứng tuyển đại học. Thì vâng, thì tôi cũng xin kết thúc ở đây và chúc quý vị có một buổi tối an lành ạ. Dạ, xin cảm ơn ạ. So bye, Carol. See you. Thank you so much. See you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will end the webinar.